Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, October the 21st, 2025. Today is Benjamin Netanyahu's 76th birthday, and perhaps some of us will want to wish him a happy birthday. It is not just Benjamin Netanyahu's 76th birthday, it is also the day of a new moon. And in this video, I want to both look at Benjamin Netanyahu's horoscope and also the chart of the new moon, that exact moment when the new moon becomes exact, to see, what kind of new moon it is. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, October the 21st, 2025. And here is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. And you can see that at noon in New York, the moon is at 0 degrees Scorpio. So the moon goes into Scorpio today at 4:42 p.m. London time. So that means that if you're in New York or the Eastern time zone, the moon moves into Scorpio, just before noon. So the day starts with the moon in Libra and it ends with the moon in Scorpio. And it is also the day of a new moon. So just before the moon moves into Scorpio, the moon makes a conjunction to the sun. So we have this new moon, and this is clearly something that I need to talk about. And so the moon is perhaps not in a very good position today, whichever way you look at it. In Libra, it's conjunct the sun, and it's always difficult when the moon is conjunct the sun. It's combust. The moon can be somewhat burnt out, and then the moon changes sign. Of course, it moves into Scorpio, and the moon is fallen in Scorpio. And the beginning of Scorpio is particularly difficult for the moon. The moon is at its point of maximum fall at 3 degrees Scorpio. And of course, the moon is in the Via Combusta. And the Via Combusta, that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio, tends to be worse on the Scorpio side of it. And so, the moon can perhaps create some problems, and it might indicate a time when we can't necessarily predict what's going to happen next. And when the moon does move into Scorpio, it makes a square to Pluto. In fact, you could say that the new moon is square to Pluto. New moon at 28 Libra, square Pluto at what, sort of 1 degree Aquarius. And so today could be somewhat difficult, could be intense, and there is there's a lot of stuff in water signs. We've got you've got 5 planets in water signs. Once the moon moves into Scorpio, we've got we've got Moon, Mars, Mercury in Scorpio, plus we've got Jupiter in Cancer, Saturn in Pisces. So it's all sort of coming together, and the emotional side of things shouldn't be ignored. Additionally, we still have a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. We had a conjunction between Mercury and Mars yesterday, but that conjunction hasn't really gone away. It's still less than a degree apart, and that does create extra intensity. So for many of us, it may be quite a complicated day, and we shouldn't necessarily assume that everything is going to plan. But it's always interesting when we've got this new moon in Libra, and yet straight away we get the moon moving into Scorpio. So it's like a new moon that reminds us of the end, because it's in such late degrees. So it's not like a usual new moon where you think about new moons, new beginnings. Let's think of a brand new start. It's almost like it's quite a full moon kind of new moon, if that makes any sense. Because you normally regard full moons as something being revealed, the results of an action, whereas a new moon is the beginning of an action. But this new moon is kind of a bit different, and it's quite a complicated new moon. I'll be talking about that later in the video because it makes some quite important midpoints. But I'll be talking about that later. So that's the picture for the Americas, set for New York. If we look at the chart set for Sydney, Australia, then the moon is at 22 Libra. So if you are in Sydney, Australia, or if you're in New Zealand or East Asia, the moon doesn't go into Scorpio today. So all the stuff I say about Scorpio doesn't apply for the moment. I mean, the moon will eventually go into Scorpio, of course, tomorrow. But, right now, that's not something you need to worry about. The moon is still in the Via Combusta. The moon is still slowly starting to move to a square to Pluto, but maybe if you're in Australasia, things won't be quite so intense as if you were in, for example, the Americas. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And as far as what we have here, we've got Venus sextile Jupiter. Venus sextile Jupiter seems to be a bit of a mitigator. I mean, it's not a bad aspect. The two benefics in sextile in the heliocentric chart, and it perhaps means that at a higher level there are things to be optimistic about. Good luck may not be totally obscure, but perhaps we can find it. So if we do the right things, if we do things which are in accord with the universe, then the universe will reward us. Of course, we've got to choose the right things to do. We just can't do what feels good. We have to really understand ourselves. But if we can find something that is really in accord with our destiny, then I think that this Venus sextile Jupiter is going to be helpful, and we can gain real satisfaction from what we're doing. We do have another sextile. We have Mars sextile Pluto. That Mars sextile Pluto, it's over a degree apart, but I think that it's still around. And so Mars sextile Pluto, it can be a time when we can decide that something is important and really give it our best shot. And Mars sextile Pluto is quite an intense aspect, and there's nothing wrong with intensity, provided that intensity is directed at the right things. And perhaps that goes back to what is right for us. And if we choose the things which are right for us, then perhaps we can't go or won't go too far wrong. So, the overall picture astrologically is, there aren't a huge amount of aspects, but the aspects we have and the events we have could be quite intense. New moon, square Pluto, moon moving into Scorpio, moon square Pluto. So, for some of us, perhaps we can avoid this. Perhaps if we just do something else, don't take things too seriously, maybe today is going to be relatively easy. But there are maybe at the same time things that do need to be taken seriously. So let's now turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, October the 21st, 2025. Aries. Things continue to be, quite serious. And I don't mean serious in the bad sense of a word. It's just that Mercury is still conjunct Mars, and with Mercury conjunct Mars in Scorpio, there's a lot, Aries, that you might be thinking about, that you want to sort out, and that it's nothing trivial. And so Aries, if you do want to take yourself seriously, I think you can. And it may be that there are things that you just find are really quite annoying. And the question then is, what do you do with your annoyance? And that was an issue you had yesterday when that Mercury-Mars conjunction, well, when it was exact, but it's still exact. And perhaps there are things, Aries, that you need to work out on your own, in your own way, and you can't necessarily get any help. You have to give things your absolute focus, and the less you're disturbed, the better. And Aries, it might be good that you are more intense than usual. Sometimes Aries can take things too lightly, can move from one thing to another too quickly. You don't give things a chance. Maybe you don't give people a chance. And by lingering, you give yourself an opportunity to really find out what's going on, on an emotional level. Don't forget Mars is still in Scorpio. Mars is 20 degrees Scorpio. So with Mars, with that placement, you're still in the middle of the sign. Okay, Mars is just edging into the last decade of Scorpio, the last 10 degrees of Scorpio, but you've still got plenty of time to enjoy Mars moving through this rather intense sign. But Mars is strongly placed in Scorpio, and I think that's something you can continue to benefit from. Now, we also have a new moon. New moon at the end of Libra, new moon at the end of your opposite sign. And new moon can say something about relationships in the Aries chart. It could be about a change, a new page in the way you deal with other people, the way you manage them. And in many cases, the new moon can be about someone new coming into your life, or someone new becoming important. Perhaps someone you've known for a long time, but you didn't take them very seriously. But now you've got to look at them again and realize that they could have an important role in your life. And so, be aware of that. And, I'm talking about, any kind of relationship, anything where it's just you and another person working on something, being with each other, having some shared set of goals. Although the new moon can represent competition, it can represent rivalry. So it's not necessarily a situation where you've got a clear field. So if there's something you feel that you're good at, that you're the best at, there might be competition. And with this new moon, you perhaps realize for the first time that competition is very real. Taurus, other people continue to matter. I've talked about the Mercury-Mars conjunction yesterday, in very close Mercury-Mars conjunction. The Mercury-Mars conjunction is in Scorpio. And we also have the moon moving into Scorpio, later in the day, perhaps tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. So big focus on Scorpio now, Moon, Mercury, Mars, true black moon Lilith as well in Scorpio. So you can't necessarily do everything on your own. And, even if you want to do everything on your own, you have to take into account other people's impact, what they're saying to you. You may not like what they say, but people do have an opinion, and that opinion needs to be taken into account. Also, people sometimes get angry. They can get annoyed, and you shouldn't, underestimate their annoyance. You're not the only person that has strong feelings. I mean, sometimes you might think that is the case, but it's not. And people can get annoyed in ways that are really quite unexpected. And so, Taurus, you just need to be ready for that, and to be as aware as possible. And I think you could be quite aware, especially on a global level. I think that many Taurans could just get upset about things that really have nothing to do with you. I mean, at least not in a personal way, your personal interest. Things will get to you. And Taurus, is arguably quite a political sign. Very often, it has definite views about the way society should be organized and what's wrong with society, and how countries and municipalities, even at whatever level you want to look at, and you can just feel that things aren't right, and at the same time you can see how other people are suffering. I think you've got a good awareness of other people's suffering, and the question is, what do you want to do about it, and what you can do about it. If we're talking about politics, and if we're talking about something at a planetary level, what can you do? Okay, you can give some money to charity. You can perhaps protest. Whatever it is, whatever you feel you need to do. But you're quite connected at the moment, and I think that is a good thing, provided you don't take it too far. Additionally, we have a new moon in Libra, and this new moon in Libra, well, it takes place obviously just before the moon moves into Scorpio, and this new moon is perhaps reminding you that however concerned you are about things, whatever's going on out there, you need to start at home. You need to start with what you can do, with what you're in control of. So before trying to take over the world, before trying to have your own private revolution, you need to get your own house in order. And with this new moon, I think that is something that you very much can do. And with this new moon in late Libra, it kind of indicates that you were just almost ready to move from one place to another, and then you realize that you weren't ready. There was stuff that needed to be sorted out. At least I think that might be how you relate to this new moon. It's just not as good as things aren't as good as they should be, and that if you were to just rush from one place to another, you would just be leaving behind a bit of a mess, just things that had not been sorted out. And so perhaps that is your first priority. Also, this new moon, it could say something about your health. And I'm not giving health advice. I'm always make this clear. It's more about lifestyle, and what makes you feel good, what makes you feel bad, and perhaps Taurus. You have. Don't forget, you're an Earth sign. You have a good sense of your own body and what your body appreciates, what puts your body out of balance. And when I talk about the body, well, it's also your just general feeling of harmony on a sort of a psychological, spiritual, as well as, of course, a physical level. And it's Libra, new moon in Libra. It's about balance, and you need to make sure you are in balance. And so it's very important that you don't worry too much about what's going on the other side of a planet, when you yourself might be ever so slightly out of balance. And so perhaps, Taurus, what you can do is address the issue. Think about what you're doing wrong. Think about what you might be neglecting. What can you do to make yourself feel happier and healthier and more in harmony with the universe? And if you think about it, you'll know what needs to be done, and I think that's going to make things a lot easier for yourself as you contemplate the future. Whatever your big plans are, you need to make sure you are all in order, that you have a situation for yourself which is harmonious and grounded and well organized. So get your priorities right. Gemini. Mercury is still conjunct Mars. That hasn't gone away. And that was a big theme of yesterday. I think I went on about it in my horoscope for Monday. And so with Mercury conjunct Mars, there are things you continue to be rather annoyed about, things that you find irritating. And the question is, what do you do with this irritation? And I think it's important that you are as constructive as possible with it. So, it does matter that you you do something that is useful. You don't just move from one thing to another and just create chaos all around you. I think you could, because something should be done, but you're not quite sure what should be done, and you just move from one place to another, and just nothing gets done, and it's just a constant whirlwind of irritation and uncertainty, and that gets you nowhere. And so instead, Gemini, decide what is important, and don't get annoyed about things which really are completely unnecessary. But it could happen. So it's important, Gemini, that you are able to get your priorities right, and in that way you're able to sort of create the right atmosphere around yourself, because once you've got yourself sorted out, you'll see other people respond accordingly. People are quite prepared to give you a chance at the moment, and in fact your social skills are pretty good, provided you're sufficiently organized and self-directed. People want to know. People want some kind of consistency here. And if you're going from sort of one place to another, one subject to another, if you're showing yourself to be sort of ever so slightly obsessive, that's not going to help. But I think there is something you can do. So if you yourself are centered, then everyone else is going to be centered, and you are going to be appreciated. Now, we do have a new moon today, new moon in Libra, and this new moon perhaps allows you to recognize that something is worth bothering with. It could be that there was something going on, Gemini, that you just weren't taking it seriously, and it was passing you by, and you weren't really thinking about it. Time goes quickly in a Gemini world, and you just you took something for granted, and you looked at it, you thought about it, but you didn't do anything about it. And this new moon might suddenly make you realize that you're about to miss a chance, that something is passing you by, something that could be really good for you if you could just take hold of it and make the most of it. Again, time goes quickly. You can be in a wonderful situation and you're just complacent about it. You, for example, you could be in a particular country and you stay in this country for longer than you expect, and you had this wonderful chance to learn the language and the culture and whatever, but you just assume that you were just going to be moving on, and that might be an important an important issue. Gemini likes change. Gemini might just be assuming that something is going to change. Yeah, things always change in the end, but some things last for long enough for you to really take advantage of them, for you to gain expertise from them. And you perhaps need to recognize that. And maybe this new moon is like a last chance to recognize that you've got a big opportunity here. So far, you have been wasting this opportunity. You haven't been taking it seriously. You perhaps haven't been incorporating it into your life. You haven't been developing an expertise. And it could have been happening. But fortunately, you've got the new moon, and fortunately maybe you're listening to me. I don't want to flatter myself though. So there is a chance here, but I don't think that chance is going to last forever. And it is a chance to do something that could be really important, really good for your creativity, could be an opportunity to gain some new skill, some new expertise, but that opportunity is certainly not going to last forever. Cancer. There's a rather interesting new moon today. And I say it's interesting because it's, right at the end of the sign. It's taking place at 28:31 Libra. So, the moon is, almost in Scorpio. Well, the sun is almost in Scorpio, but not quite. And the question is, Cancer, what does this new moon, actually mean? It perhaps says something about your home and where you're living, and it could represent a new chapter, or perhaps the beginning of an old chapter, or the beginning of a last chapter. Is it the beginning of the end, or is it end of the beginning, as Churchill would like to say? But so the beginning of the end. Now that sounds rather grim, the beginning of the end, but I don't mean the beginning of the end in a negative sense at all. It's a time when you're slowly starting to think about the end of something, because you're going to move on to something else eventually. And yeah, that might say something about your home. Could say something about your family as well. Perhaps you've been living somewhere for a long time, and you know that you're going to continue living there, but you also know that you're not going to be living there forever. And this is what the new moon might say to you. This is the final phase, the final part of the book. I'm not telling you anything, by the way. I'm not saying this will happen. I'm just suggesting that this might be a way of looking at the new moon, because the lunar cycle is important to you as a Cancerian, wherever the new moon is. But with this particular new moon, it does indicate that it is a new beginning, but it's a new beginning as in the beginning of a last chapter, the beginning of the last part of a book. And you're looking beyond the book. What is the next stage going to be? And so Cancer, I think that this should be a time of hope. It's also a time, Cancer, where you are aware that things could be better. And if you persist with the current situation, well, it might be good enough, but it could be better. And if you do persist with it without making changes, without making plans for the future, you could find yourself getting tense, annoyed, and frustrated. So take on board what the new moon means. Now, if you are in most of the world, but particularly the Americas, the moon will move into Scorpio today. So if you're in New York, for example, the moon moves into Scorpio just before noon. If you're in California, it will move into Scorpio or even earlier, sort of I think just before 9 o'clock in the morning. If you're in Europe or Africa, then it won't be till late afternoon. Or even early evening, the moon moves into Scorpio. But whenever the moon does move into Scorpio, I think that for a Cancer, it's not so bad, the moon moving into Scorpio. I always have to say that when the moon moves into Scorpio when I'm talking to Cancerians, because you're familiar with the intensity of the moon in Scorpio. Not everyone can deal with it. Now, the moon, when it moves into Scorpio, it does make a square to Pluto, and this moon square Pluto is quite an intense aspect. It makes you think about what is important and what you need to take seriously. And indeed, Cancer, I think that there are some things that you are taking very seriously. You can't let go of them, and that can be a Cancerian trait, just holding on. You're not ready to let anyone off the hook. If something is important, you're going to stay with it until the very end. And I think that is the right approach. Though in some quarters, you might be regarded as someone who is quite intense. You may not regard things as particularly intense, but other people might. And so you are a serious person with serious priorities, and I think that you can utilize the moon moving into Scorpio. You can kind of be at the center of this seriousness, and of course, at the center of the wheel, nothing moves. As far as you're concerned, everything's fine. But you might just find that other people, when they're in your into touch with you. They're kind of tiptoeing a bit because, yeah, you do seem to be quite a serious person, and that's probably, the right image to project. Leo, there is at the moment, Leo, a certain tension. You can feel that things aren't quite right. They aren't quite as they should be, and that might sound a problem. I mean, I don't think it need be a problem. I think that it is a time when you can contemplate change. You know that change has to happen, because if you just persist with the status quo, well, you're not going to be happy about it. You're going to feel that you are stuck, and additionally, tension levels could increase, and part of the tension might be about you wanting to do better for yourself, and perhaps in the current situation you might feel that you're just not being given that opportunity. So don't persist with something that you feel bored of. If you need to have a change, you must be ready to make that change. And perhaps the new moon today, because we've got a new moon in late Libra, perhaps the new moon is going to help. And this new moon is about the development and understanding of a set of ideas. Things have been building up. Perhaps over the last few weeks, you've realized one thing, you've realized another thing, and it's all starting to come together, and it's coming together in a way that is slow, but with a new moon, it's there. It has arrived, and you therefore are in a position where you can start making decisions, and some of these decisions could be fundamental, but they have been taking a long time to develop, very, very slow. But once you've made that decision, once you realize that something is wrong, then Leo, you obviously have to do something about it, and you're not going to be just happy staying in one place. Now, just after the new moon, we have the moon moving into Scorpio. A lot of planets in Scorpio, Moon, Mars, Mercury. And with these planets in Scorpio, you have to be a bit careful. The problem with these Scorpio planets is that they just might be just too intense and too stuck. The sign Scorpio is at the bottom of your chart, and so with Moon, Mars, and Mercury, and indeed true Black Moon Lilith in Scorpio, you could sort of ruminate. You know that something needs to change. You know that things could be better, but you just stay in one place. You focus on one thing, and the more you ruminate, the more annoyed you get, the more frustrated you get. So you have to appreciate that this cannot go on forever. It may be the case, Leo, that there's work you have to do. Work you have to do, maybe on your own, in a safe place. But you have to have an end result. It can't just go on forever. There has to be an end result, because you are looking for improvement, and you have to be able to move on. So I think that really does matter. And over the next month maybe, this may continue to be an issue, because you mustn't forget that the sun, your ruler, is on the verge of moving into Scorpio. In 2 days' time, the sun will be in Scorpio. And there will be a lot of planets in Scorpio. Well, I mean, the moon will move into Sagittarius as the sun goes into Scorpio, but still, the sun moving into Scorpio is an important time for you. But you don't want to take it too seriously, because when the Sun moves into Scorpio, it makes a square to Pluto. I mean, I will be going into that in a few days' time, but you don't want to get stuck, and you need to create movement for yourself. At the same time, you've got to appreciate your fundamental security. You don't want to destabilize yourself, but you could destabilize yourself by just staying in one place. So, Leo, there's something you have to work out, and you need a purpose and you need a focus. And it's not just about having lots of ideas. You need to have an overarching aim. And that's something that you need to really be developing, really as soon as possible. Because if you don't have a purpose, if you don't have an aim, then very soon you could start feeling incredibly frustrated, and you could waste a lot of time, and you may also be quite a difficult person to be with. So Leo, you perhaps have to shift your attitude, and I think you get what needs to be done, but you just don't want to be too fixed. Remember, Leo is a fixed sign, and it's great to be fixed. It's great to have persistence. It's great to have staying power, but fixity can be a problem, because fixity can get stuck, and you don't want to be stuck. You want things to be better for yourself. So really, Leo, find a reason, find a purpose, find a direction, and perhaps have targets for yourself. For example, what do you want to achieve by the end of November, by the time the Sun moves into Sagittarius. So maybe there's some homework for you to do there. Virgo. Mercury conjunct Mars. We had that yesterday, and Mercury is still conjunct Mars, and this Mercury-Mars conjunction, of course, has its problems. It can be the case that you just get irritated. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? I mean, Mercury is your ruler. If it's conjunct Mars, there are things for you to get annoyed about. And I talked about some of the issues of Mercury-Mars yesterday. I, for example, indicated that you had to be careful with travel, for example, particularly short distance travel, driving. That warning persists, especially as the moon is moving into Scorpio. So the moon moves into Scorpio, well, it depends where you are, but maybe in the morning in Americas, this afternoon in Europe, or early evening in Europe, or might be tomorrow if you're in Australasia. But when you've got the moon in Scorpio, you've got Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, then the question of short distance traveling and how you get from A to B could become important. So don't travel just for the sake of it. And if you are moving around, don't be impatient. Things may take longer than expected. Though, I don't want to be pessimistic. There's no need to be pessimistic. I think as a communicator, Virgo, you're going to be very effective. You know what needs to be said, and you can use words very effectively. And also, you have a certain charm. It may not be an obvious charm, but there's something about you that people are going to like and appreciate. And if you want to have new people around, at least get in contact with new people. Okay, it may not always work, but some people like you, some people don't. Some people like your approach, others don't. But you don't have to feel that you are alone. So whatever opportunity that you have to increase your social circle, then I would suggest that you take it, because with the right people you can be very effective. And of course, with this Mercury-Mars conjunction, you know how to advocate for causes, and you know how to advocate for yourself. And you might frighten some people away, but other people might find your approach quite compelling. And while this is going on, we have a new moon. We've got a new moon in late Libra, and I'm going through the signs. I'm telling each sign how this new moon might impact them. This new moon could say something about your finances and how you deal with money, and it could be the culmination of a set of realizations. You've had realizations about your money and how you're making money, how you're saving money, how you're spending money, how you're dealing with other people, and how they're responding to you in a financial sense. Are they respecting your financial needs? Are they making financial demands on you? All this kind of thing. It's all been sort of building up. And, with this new moon in Libra, you might find that suddenly things start making sense. And it has been building up for quite some time. And, this new moon, as I've been saying in this video, has a full moon quality to it. When I say a full moon quality, a full moon is often about a realization. And it could be that, there have been sort of incremental moments of understanding about your finances over the last month. And now it's all becoming clear. And with this new moon, you understand, what needs to be done. You also understand that things could be better, and that the old way of doing things, the old approach to money, is not necessarily good enough. But it is a new moon. It's not like you have to do anything immediately, but you have to have a plan, and you have to work out how you are going to go about pushing forward with your financial interests, and making sure that you're not being taken advantage of. But Virgo, I think you really do know what you need to do, and you shouldn't hold off for too long. I mean, if you miss your chance, if you do nothing, well, that could be a wasted opportunity. Libra, new moon in your sign. And new moon in Libra, well, this is quite late for a new moon in Libra, because the sun and the moon are about to go into Scorpio. The Libran season, in some respects, is nearly over. Okay, Venus is still in Libra, but it is a very late new moon. The Libra new moon is late in the year, but better late than never. It has arrived, and so for many Librans, this could be, quite an important moment. It's a time to have a new start, perhaps a late start, but as I said, better late than never. And this new moon, is square Jupiter. Okay, it's not exactly square Jupiter, but I think that the Jupiter involvement with the new moon refers to the essential ambition here. And I think that you are ambitious, and you're starting to realize what you want, what you would like to happen. And this new moon allows you to initiate things. So perhaps you've been working things out for some time. You've been sort of working out what you would like to happen, and working out what you want to do, what precisely you want to do. And, in the past, you maybe hadn't articulated it very well. You thought, well, is this important? I don't want to bother anyone. But now you've got this new moon. It's not a time for holding back anymore. You need to be very clear about what you want. And I think that Libra, you're going to just realize that, in the past, just things haven't quite been good enough. And if you look at this new moon, you could argue that this new moon is part of a T-square. So the sun is making a square to Jupiter. May not be immediately obvious because it's separating, but the sun is also starting to make a square to Pluto. So the sun the sun and the moon, this new moon is halfway between the square to Jupiter and the square to Pluto. So you bring this all together, and it actually then becomes quite a powerful new moon for you. And when we're thinking about Jupiter Pluto, that's where the self-improvement comes in. Jupiter Pluto is just not happy with the way things are, and it could be an awakening for you, Libra. You perhaps not taken things particularly seriously, and you just assumed that everything was going to work out, assumed that there was nothing that you could do, nothing you should do, and then suddenly you wake up, and that might be how you experience it. And the moment you wake up, you feel tense. I mean, that's good that you feel tense. The reason you feel tense is because you just know that something has to change. And so, Libra, it's not a time for thinking anymore. I think it is a time for action. I mean, you don't have to be in a desperate hurry, but maybe, while Venus is still in Libra, I mean, Venus will be in Libra for a week or a couple of weeks longer. Venus is still fairly early in the sign. It's 9 degrees 40 Libra, so it's like you still got a bit of a chance to make the most of Venus in Libra. But Venus in Libra may be about sort of helping you to realize what it is that you want. And so don't be complacent. Don't assume that things will sort themselves out, because they won't sort themselves out, and deep down that is the case. So I mean, I think overall this new moon is really quite motivating. And at the same time, we've got a lot of planets in Scorpio. The moment the moment a new moon happens, moon moves into Scorpio. And when the moon moves into Scorpio, things change. It means that you've got Moon, Mars, Mercury in Scorpio. Scorpio is a sign in the Libran chart, but often is quite connected with money. And so you've also got with the Mercury-Mars conjunction, perhaps you realize that something of a financial nature does need to be resolved, does need to be sorted out, and it could almost become quite obsessive, and that's a good thing. Maybe you've allowed something to just get out of control. You haven't taken it seriously, you just let things slip, and you perhaps know deep down that your financial situation could be better, and now you have a chance to do something about it. And it's all links with the new moon as well. New moon is a new beginning, and you just knowing across the board that improvement is required, self-improvement. And it's good to have that realization. And so make sure you really make the most of this chance to make a real impact. Scorpio. The moon is getting ready to move into Scorpio, and so is the sun. So in a couple of days' time, there'll be a big change coming up. And already we have Mercury and Mars in Scorpio. So the moon is getting ready to go into Scorpio, and with the sun going to Scorpio, it's all happening, and the emphasis is about to really be on your sign. So Scorpio, it is not a time to be hiding. It's a time to be thinking about what you have to contribute, and so Scorpio, don't hold back. At least get ready to make your move. Though as far as the specifics of today are concerned, the moon is going to be in Libra for some of the day, perhaps all of the day if you're in Australia or New Zealand. And additionally, we have a new moon in Libra. And this is a bit puzzling, because you're getting ready for everything to move into Scorpio. And then you have this big event, this new moon, in the sign before Scorpio. You'd almost expect there to be a Scorpio new moon, but that Scorpio new moon is not going to happen for some time. Well, it won't happen until the sun is nearly in Sagittarius. I mean, just to tell you when the Scorpio new moon is, because it is quite late this year. The Scorpio new moon is on November the 20th. So that's right at the end, when the sun is getting ready to move into Sagittarius. So this Libra new moon is kind of a contradiction, because at one level you're getting ready to go. Mercury and Mars are in Scorpio. We've had this Mercury-Mars conjunction, and so you are thinking a lot about yourself and what you can do, and you feel perhaps ready to tell everyone what's important, and perhaps to sort of align yourself to the future. But then this new moon in Libra, it's in the sign before Scorpio, and it has an introspective feel to it. It's not about taking dramatic initiatives. It's not feeling that you absolutely have to take action right now, at least the kind of action that everyone sees. And so perhaps there's still a bit of preparation that needs to be done. The new moon is indicating that you need time on your own. You need time to think things through, and perhaps the new moon has quite a psychological element to it. With the psychology, thinking about things in your own way, coming to realizations, and when you think about this new moon, it can be about your dream world, what you're dreaming, what you're thinking, what you're imagining. And sometimes these things shouldn't be revealed. So the question might be, what do you reveal and what do you keep to yourself? I think perhaps you can reveal things which you've already worked through. And there are a lot of things you have worked through, a lot of things that you absolutely understand and you can talk about with great authority. But there are other things that are still developing. And if something is still developing, then you probably shouldn't talk too much about it. And additionally, Scorpio has a reputation as a sign for being quite secretive, and perhaps this new moon may emphasize your secretive nature, doing something that other people aren't aware of. Or it could be you're doing something with another person, perhaps secret negotiations, secret discussions, planning something that you don't want to reveal to the wider world. So that could be a way in which this new moon is working. Additionally, Mars is changing decanate. Now, this is a bit of a subtlety. I don't know how important it is, but the decanates, you can divide each sign into 3 parts of 10 degrees. So you've got first decanate between 0 and 10 degrees, second decanate between 10 and 20, and then the last decanate 20 degrees to the end of a sign. So Mars is ruling into a decanate, or you can call the decanate a face. And so the last face of Scorpio is ruled by Venus. And so Mercury and Mars, you've got this Mercury-Mars conjunction moving out of the decanate of the Sun and moving into the decanate of Venus. Now that might mean that as Mars moves into the last third of Scorpio, you do perhaps soften slightly. You become more reasonable, more accommodating, and perhaps you're better able to deal with other people. And the Venus, the decanate ruler is in Libra, Venus in Libra. So your social skills could very well improve as Mars moves into a Venus ruled decanate. And in general, you are able to get on with people better. And it doesn't mean to say that you have to reveal everything, but you can be quite charming. You know how to get on with people. the Mercury-Mars conjunction, because it's not just Mercury changing decanate. Sorry, it's not just Mars moving into the decanate of Venus. It's also Mercury. So this Mercury-Mars conjunction, which I think is pretty important, does soften. So I said that the Mercury-Mars conjunction could be quite aggressive. Things you want to say which other people might not appreciate. You say, got to get the words out, perhaps using harsh words. But with the Mercury-Mars conjunction now being in the face of Libra rather than being in the face of Venus rather than in the face of the Sun, it just might be that you can use this Mercury-Mars conjunction in a more constructive way. Yeah, you've got lots of things to say, you've got lots of things to talk about, but it'll be easier to fine-tune your words so that they won't cause offense, and you'll know how to tell people things in such a way that they will appreciate what you're saying. And if you want to flatter people or make people feel good about themselves, I think you can. I know that Scorpio is not a sign that is into flattery, but if you want to flatter someone, if you want to make people feel good, I think that you certainly can. And as a result of this, I think that relationships could improve. Perhaps this Mercury-Mars conjunction, which might have been a problem in certain relationships, perhaps you were too honest, or there was something just a little bit too prickly about you with this Mercury-Mars conjunction. I think that now, with these planets moving into the last decanate, I think you're going to be easier going, and as a result, relationships may see an uptick. Sagittarius. There is a new moon, and this new moon is, I think, pretty straightforward as far as you are concerned. And this new moon is in Libra, and Libra is a pretty sociable sign. This new moon is in the same sign as Venus. I mean, Venus is in Libra. You've got a new moon in Venus. Sorry, you've got a new moon in Libra. We've got Venus being in the same sign as new moon. I mean, they're a long way off. They're 19 degrees apart, but you could argue if they're in the same sign, there is a Venusian influence to this new moon. And as a result of this new moon, I think that you're going to find it relatively easy to get on with people, but you have to do it, your way. So if you need people, I think that you can certainly benefit from their company. You can get whatever it is you need, but you don't have to give too much away. I don't think you're going to want to give too much away. And Sagittarius, things can be quite light. You don't have to be too intense about it. I know that for some of us it could be quite an intense day, but I don't think for you. I think that you know how you want things to be. You know how much you're prepared to give, and I think that you do have a clear sense of your own boundaries. But this new moon is right at the end of the sign. Really 28 degrees 31, approximately 28:31 Libra. What was it? Let me get this right. It's at 28:22 Libra. Sorry about that. So this new moon being at the end of the sign does indicate endings at some level, because the sun and the moon are getting ready to move into Scorpio, and it could be that you meet people, you talk to people, but you know that it's all coming to an end. You can be friendly with someone, you can have a meal with them. It's as if nothing has happened, but you know that something is coming to an end. You know that certain people are going to be moving out of your life. Maybe not right now, and perhaps at some level you can feel that sort of farewell vibe to it. And I'm not saying that you actually have to say goodbye to anyone, but there could be a feeling of goodbyes with this new moon. Now, I know that we don't normally associate new moons with goodbyes. We perhaps more associate full moons with goodbyes, but I think for you, this is a new moon where you do realize that nothing lasts forever, and and that may say something about how you deal with people, and why would you want to end things? I mean, that is an important question. Why would you be thinking that way? And the reason you might be thinking about that about it this way is that you're starting to think about the future. And I'm not talking about your ambitions here. I'm talking about your perception of the future, of your future, and what you hope for, what you'd like things to be in, I don't know, years time, 5 years time, whatever. It depends on your situation. But what you'd like, how you'd like things to be. And so if you want things to be in a particular way, what would you have to change? And if you're honest with yourself, there are quite a lot of things that do have to change. And we live in a social world. We are constrained by the people around us. When we have social ties, whether it's to do with our friends or even our family, they do constrain us. They limit what we can do. And so if you want to make progress, if you want to move towards your glorious future, whatever that glorious future might be, okay, it might not be glorious, it just might be a future that is appropriate for you. But as you move towards that future, you have to make adjustments. And part of these adjustments, might relate to your social life, for people people you care about. And right now with this new moon, you can see the ending. And I'm not saying it has to be the case, and I'm not talking about anything sort of desperate or tragic, and I'm not giving any warnings about anything disastrous. I'm talking about you and your choices. So that's something I would suggest that you think about. Also, heliocentrically, to end on a fortunate note, heliocentrically we have a sextile aspect between Venus and Jupiter. Jupiter is your ruler. Venus is sextile Jupiter. So, Sagittarius, if you concentrate today on things that are right for you, then you can't go wrong. So you're going to be fortunate. You're going to be lucky today. But again, you've got to do the right things. But you know what the right things are, and you do it, and you'll get the rewards. Capricorn. Think about what you are trying to achieve. What would you like to achieve? And how successful have you been so far? And we do have a new moon in Libra, and this might be what this new moon is all about. This new moon is in a cardinal sign. So cardinal sign, Capricorn, you are a cardinal sign, and now you have a chance to align yourself to whatever it is that you want, and also to think about the past, the recent past, and why you might not have been as successful perhaps as you should have been. And I think that it can come together. Perhaps you were starting to give up. Perhaps you thought that certain things were unachievable, unattainable. You tried. Maybe you didn't have the motivation. Maybe the circumstances weren't right. But don't give up. This new moon is telling you it is not too late. And even though the sun and the moon are about to move into Scorpio, it doesn't matter. This new moon is fixed. And when I say it's fixed, I mean it's that degree, 28 degrees Libra, is going to be important for the next 2 weeks, maybe even the next 4 weeks. And so over the next 2 to 4 weeks, Capricorn, you do have a chance to maybe make up for lost ground. And I think that is an important theme of this new moon for many of the 12 signs, making up for lost ground. And perhaps you had chances to get things together and you didn't, or something turned up and you weren't able to. You had to delay, but it doesn't matter. The point is that things really can happen, and you have the You have the willpower. Really, you do. You have that mental focus. You can think about what is important to you, what you want to achieve, what you want to get off the ground. And if you are talking to people, if you're communicating, you're going to come over as being very, very effective and very persuasive. People are going to listen to you, and in an argument, you're going to be a difficult person to beat. So stick to your ground, hold to your ground, and just realize that it can all be yours. That you haven't missed your chance, but you could miss your chance. It's Tuesday now. Over the next couple of days, what are you planning on doing? The new moon should motivate you to make changes, to really make it clear to yourself and to others what it is that is important to you. And with that approach, I think that you can be pretty optimistic about how things work out over the next few weeks, and maybe until the next new moon, which I think the next new moon is on the 20th of November. So this is perhaps a beginning, and Capricorn, you definitely have what it takes. Aquarius, you are quite ambitious right now. I was talking to Capricorn just now, and I was really encouraging Capricorn to get it together, and for Capricorn to recognize that it's not too late. And I kind of say the same thing to you. I suppose that you and Capricorn, both have the same ruler, Saturn. But in your case, it is slightly different. We're talking about this conjunction between Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, still very much there. And I think that this is a really powerful conjunction, and it's about you knowing what you want and being able to really put in the work. I mean, you can do it, Capricorn, and you don't have. Sorry, Aquarius, you can do it, Aquarius. You don't have to be distracted. And if you keep going, in the same direction, then what can stop you? What can hold you back? Though there might be a slight change of emphasis, because Mercury and Mars are changing. Well, they have changed. They've changed decanate. So Mercury and Mars are now at 20 degrees Scorpio. So they've moved out of the decanate ruled by the Sun, because the Sun rules the middle decanate of Scorpio, and they're now moving into the last decanate of Scorpio, which is ruled by Venus. And because it's ruled by Venus, I think that's good news for a number of reasons. Firstly, Venus is going to make you more approachable, and you're going to find it easier to tell people about yourself and what you want, and I think people are going to be more responsive to you. And also, Venus is in Libra. Venus is in its in its own sign, and so I think that you're going to be more approachable now. And perhaps in the recent past, over the last week, when you were trying to express your needs and your desires and your ambitions, it wasn't always easy, and you might have come over as being a little bit too aggressive. But now you can soften the message without weakening yourself. So perhaps you've reached a point where you are recognizing that you need a degree of support. You can't necessarily do everything on your own, and now things have reached a stage where you're sufficiently confident to perhaps open up about what you want, and you can give other people a certain amount of consideration. And so there's nothing wrong with being nice. And if you make an effort to be nice, I think that your pleasantness will be reciprocated, and it won't get in the way with your it won't get in the way of your ambitions. Now, aside from that, we do have a new moon, and we have a new moon in Libra. So new moon in Libra, that's always something to welcome, isn't it? I mean, Libra is an air sign, Aquarius is an air sign, and so this new moon in Libra is perhaps is something different. It's not just about ambition. I mean, it's good to have ambition, but you've got to think about something else. You've got to think about something broader. Your ambitions work in a broader framework, a framework perhaps of your destiny. I mean, destiny goes beyond ambition. It's about what you are aligning yourself to. It's about where you are going. Perhaps if you believe in reincarnation, moving from one incarnation to another. Even if you don't believe in reincarnation, there is a spiritual side of things. What are you on this earth for? And that's always a good question to ask. And this new moon perhaps gives you an insight. And as I've been telling a lot of people, I do think that this new moon has the nature of a full moon. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's so late in the sign. It's at 28, I think it's 28, 22 Libra. So it's late in the sign, and that means it's a culmination of a lot of other events because it's late in the sign. And so Aquarius, you can see how things have been unfolding. You can see the coincidences. You can see what worked. You can see what didn't work. It's all kind of coming together now. And this new moon can sort of frame your ambitions in some sort of wider spiritual, philosophical dimension, which you can now start to really think about and make it part of you. And this means that you can do the right thing. And if you do the right thing, for yourself, but it's also for the cosmos at large. Yeah, it does matter. I know that sounds vague, but we all have a purpose. Okay, you might say there's no purpose at all, but this is an astrology channel, and I think there is an underlying view with astrology that we do have a purpose, and perhaps we can understand our purpose by looking at our horoscope. And so, think about your purpose, but also think about your ambitions and making sure that your purpose and your ambitions align. And I think this new moon is going to help you in terms of finding that alignment. Pisces. A lot of stuff in Scorpio. And when you have a lot of stuff in Scorpio, if you're a Pisces, well, I think that's good news. It's always good to have planets in water signs. And the sun is, of course, about to go into Scorpio. So we're about to get big emphasis on the sign Scorpio. So what does this mean for you? Well, it means perhaps, Pisces, that you need to go above and beyond. You mustn't just focus on things on a material level. That's one aspect of it. And also you need to think about perspective. Perhaps recently things have been at times a bit intense, and you've asked yourself a lot of deep questions, and that's reasonable. I mean, deep questions have to be asked, but you don't want to be deep just for the sake of it. I mean, you're trying to find a resolution. You're trying to find some kind of purpose. And with all these planets now in Scorpio, because the moon goes into Scorpio, it could go today, move into Scorpio today, it could be tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when the moon goes into Scorpio, that is a time to be thinking about perspective, and to think about, what is guiding you. Maybe you're guiding yourself, but something is guiding you in a particular direction, and you need to perhaps be aware of it. But at the same time as all this, we do have a new moon, so there's a sort of complicated situation where we've got a Scorpio emphasis, a growing Scorpio emphasis, but we also have a new moon in Libra, and this new moon in Libra, I don't think it need affect you directly. It's possible that you can completely ignore this new moon. I don't think it's particularly important for the average Pisces, but if it means anything, this new moon might be about a realization. Now, this realization could be emotional. It could be quite sort of deep. Something makes sense in that Scorpio kind of way. Sorry, in that Pisces kind of way. Because you are an emotional animal after all, fish, water sign, and something becomes clear. It hadn't become clear before, and it's really, there was perhaps a series of feelings taking place over the last month, and each individual feeling, each individual sensation didn't necessarily mean anything, but now it's all coming together, it's all becoming clear, and you realize what matters. And then, of course, the sun moves into Scorpio, so you have this new moon, then the sun goes into Scorpio, and perhaps at that stage the intensity starts to die down. Now, that might sound strange. A planet moving out of Libra into Scorpio means less intensity, but I think for Pisces that is how it is experienced. So that could be quite meaningful for you. Another way of looking at the new moon, by the way, is it could say something about money. It could be that you realize something about money, not just your money, but other people's money. And again, it's happening as a result of a series of realizations, of small realizations, and it's all coming together. And you perhaps realize that something isn't perfect, but something needs to be changed. And this particularly is going to be particularly the case if you're involved in financial agreements. You've assumed that these agreements are all in order and that you can trust other people, but you can't. I mean, I'm not trying to breed distrust here. I'm just saying you can't leave things to chance. So if financially you are leaving things to chance, you're assuming that, I don't know, the lawyers have sorted it out, or someone else has got your best interests at heart, or someone else knows what they're doing. Well, have another look, because there may be a few details that have been ignored, and you must be ready to ask important questions, and your timely action could make a big difference. So I'm not trying to make you worried. It's just a new moon. It may not mean anything. And finally, Pisces, as you look at what's happening today with a new moon might seem to be a new beginning, but also you might realize that something is coming to an end. And one way of looking at this new moon, because it is in very late in the sign, is that it is the beginning of the end. And I've said that to other signs, beginning of the end, and I don't mean that in a negative way. It's good, but it's the beginning of the end. And in the process, you might realize that some things in your life have had their day. They've been great up to a point, but they're not doing you any good anymore. And because of that, you don't have to do anything right now, but you have to slowly start to create some distance, or you could slowly start to create some distance. I'm not saying you have to do anything, but that might be something that you do need to think about. So those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now I want to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 41, which is decrease. Decrease is not a bad hexagram. I mean, it sounds perhaps a bit difficult because decrease, you don't want to decrease, you want more, don't you? But, decrease is telling us that there may be things that we need to let go of, that, we can't have everything. And, as we move through life, our emphasis changes. There may be times when something is really important to us and we really want to hold on to it, and then we move on. For example, if we have a hobby, an interest, and we buy things connected with this interest, and we build these things up, and I don't know, maybe chemistry was a hobby, and we have loads of chemistry equipment in the basement, for example. I mean, that's a possibility. And so we have all this chemistry equipment, and then we get bored. Then we don't have any. We lose interest in chemistry. And so what do we do with all this equipment? Well, we can't it just festers there. So at some stage we have to get rid of it. We have to give it away, sell it, whatever. So that is the positive side of decrease. It's not just about things, it's perhaps about ideas, things we regarded as being important at one stage, at some stage in our life, but now they're no longer important, and so we just move on, and we just do let go. I mean, that's what things like, I know in the US it's Goodwill, or in the UK Oxfam shops, that's what they're for. You get rid of stuff you don't want, you give it to charity. But there may be ideas and concepts that we want to give to charity as well. We don't need them. Maybe they're no good to anyone, and maybe we need to destroy them. And of course, by getting rid of something, we allow something else to take its place, because you've got to create space. And it's it's also in terms of other people. If you want new people in your life, sometimes you've got to get rid of old people. You can't have everything, and that is how one progresses, and one does need a certain amount of discernment. And what we don't want to do is to hoard. I mean, that is perhaps the problem about hoarding. We just don't let go of anything, and just if we hoard, then just the piles of garbage just build up, and we trip over it, and we don't get anywhere. And with all this garbage, okay, we might always be ready to bring something new into our life, but we don't have any discernment, and it just it just turns into a mess. So that is the broad idea of this hexagram. But when you're dealing with decrease, increase is just around the corner, because there is a hexagram number 42, which is increase. 42 doesn't come up, but they're so inextricably linked, these two concepts of increase and decrease. They're almost the same thing, the same movement. Now, the fifth line moves. And the fifth line in the I Ching is often fortunate. And in this case, it is incredibly fortunate. It's saying that things really are going to work out well. And, the Wilhelm translation of I Ching goes so far as to say that you are marked out by fate for good fortune. Now, that is an extreme thing to say, and I think that perhaps goes too far. But consider that possibility. Why would you be marked out by fate for good fortune? Well, perhaps you're doing the right thing. You've got the balance right. Perhaps you've already got rid of the things you need to get rid of, and there's something that is working. You've brought something into your life that really can work very well for you. So it's a very fortunate hexagram, really very, very fortunate. And it's also saying, don't be modest. If you are offered something, whatever it is, money, promotion, praise, whatever it is, don't refuse it. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Don't let modesty get in the way. You deserve the success that you have. And again, I'm kind of sorry to be optimistic. It's kind of dangerous being optimistic, because optimism creates false expectations, and you've got to tailor this optimism to fit your circumstances. What are you trying to achieve today? Because this is a reading just for today. What do you think you can gain today? And what opportunities are coming up today? And so really, really, really do make the most of it all. And, obviously I don't want to create false expectations. Now, we do have a move because fifth line moves. Because the fifth line moves, we move to a different hexagram. We move to hexagram number 61, which is inner truth. And, it's a similar picture with inner truth. Inner truth means our inner truth. We understand things. With inner truth, we've created the space in the middle of that hexagram. With the previous hexagram decreased, we got rid of whatever we needed to get rid of. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's so much good fortune here. Because we're being honest, and there is that space, that inner truth, and that understanding of who we are, what we're all about, and what is possible. And people can say what they like, but we understand the truth. And once you understand the truth, what can go wrong? Because you understand the truth, and it means that you're going to make the right decisions. And so I think that is another reason why today looks really good. But again, my apologies for being so optimistic, and I really don't want to create false expectations. But I'm just trying to tell you what I see in the I Ching, and there's not much to be negative about here. So finally, I want to look at things from a viewpoint of the astrology, and in particular the fact that we have a new moon today. So this new moon, just look at this new moon. This new moon is here's a chart for the new moon, a set for London. So this new moon, I make it that it's at 1:25 London time. So that's going to be this morning in the Americas. Will be quite this evening in Australia or New Zealand, and there it is. There's the new moon at 28 degrees 22 Libra. And if you were listening to my forecast of the 12 signs, I was kind of indicating or suggesting that this new moon might be experienced as the beginning of the end, and it might be perceived as more like a full moon because it's so late in the signs. I mean, maybe I'm misreading it, but that's how it feels to me at the moment. And the moon and the sun are getting ready to move into Scorpio. So it's a new moon. It's a bit of a last gasp new moon. And so it's like we have a chance to do something just before it's too late. And yeah, it is the beginning of the end. Beginning new moon. That's what new moons are about. The beginning, the end. Well, it's the end of the sign. And so it's a time where we can start perhaps wrapping things up. I was telling one of the signs that this new moon is perhaps like starting the last chapter of a book, starting the last part of a book. It is a new beginning, but the end is now in sight, and we perhaps need to start preparing for that end. So that's certainly one way of looking at this new moon. Now, this new moon is in Libra, and so you could say, well, what planet rules this new moon? Well, Venus is in Libra. And so I think that there is something potentially fortunate about the new moon as far as getting on with people. And Venus is in its own sign. So for some of us, this new moon could be an opportunity to get ourselves together, perhaps just sort out relationships. Maybe from a relationship angle, maybe this new moon isn't so bad because it's ruled by Venus. And likewise, if you're talking about money and perhaps even art, Venus can be a planet connected with art. So that's one approach. Though if you're talking about aspects, this new moon is square Jupiter and is kind of opposition Chiron. I mean, I know it's not exact, I mean, we had a Sun-Jupiter square, a few days ago, but there is a Jupiter-Chiron feel to it. So new moon square Jupiter opposition Chiron, well, it could be about wanting to take something further. There could be a slight sense of exaggeration, and also a desire to be different. I mean, we've got Jupiter square Chiron coming up anyway, and Jupiter is quite slow at the moment because Jupiter is kind of getting ready to go retrograde. It goes retrograde pretty soon, but with Jupiter square Chiron, it's wanting perhaps to be different, wanting to do something different, perhaps to expand in original ways. But there's also a wound there. We feel that we haven't been given the opportunities we'd like to have. We've got big ideas, big ambitions, but have we been able to do everything we should do? Well, not necessarily. And there could be a slight feeling of rejection here with this new moon opposition Chiron square Jupiter. We wanted more, but we didn't get it. And what are we going to do now? Well, it's a new moon. And so part of the idea of this new moon is it's not too late. Just because things have been difficult in the past, just because there's been rejection in the past, just because we haven't fulfilled our potential in the past, doesn't mean it's all over. It's nearly all over, because this new moon is very close to the end of Libra, but not quite there. And so that, I think, does give us room for optimism. Now, looking at this new moon on the dial, and I think it is important to look at the dial. So if we look at the midpoint that the new moon is on, well, some of these midpoints can actually be seen by eye. So the two midpoints that I think are very important are, firstly, this new moon is part of a T-square. It may not be immediately obvious, but there is a wide Jupiter-Pluto opposition coming up. Now that Jupiter opposition Pluto is not going to be exact until next year. Jupiter has to go into Leo before the opposition becomes exact. But this new moon is around 4 degrees from the square of Jupiter and about 3 degrees from the square of Pluto. So this new moon is halfway between Jupiter and Pluto. This new moon is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. It's also on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. So these two pairs of outer planets, Jupiter-Pluto, Saturn-Uranus, this new moon is on it. And I think that is significant. And we can see this if we put this on the dial. And this is a direct midpoint, an opposition to the midpoint. So if we turn to the 90-degree dial, here, where's the new moon gone? New moon is so there's a new moon. There is the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. There is the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So this new moon is, well, with Jupiter-Pluto, is very much the desire to improve things, to make things better. Jupiter-Pluto, it can be quite intense. It does want things to be better. It's not satisfied with the status quo. It's not satisfied with the way things used to be. And you throw Saturn-Uranus in as well, and there is real tension there. Some of us may just get really annoyed that things aren't better. We might be looking back on the past and with a certain degree of disgust think, why did we miss this opportunity? Are we going to continue missing opportunities? We have to act now. It's now or never. And this now or never feeling might just be how a lot of people around the world are experiencing this new moon. And this could have an impact on how they behave. So if things are not working out politically or geopolitically, people are going to want to do things. They're going to want to take action. And some of this action may be fortunate, but some of it may be overdone. And so that is something that we need to be very aware of. Now, another aspect of this new moon is that, remember, Neptune is getting very close to moving into Aries. So just to remind you, there's Neptune. Neptune is now at, sorry, Neptune is very close to moving back into Pisces. Neptune is at 0 degrees 1 minute Aries. I think tomorrow, Wednesday, Neptune moves back into Pisces. So going back to the 90-degree dial, Neptune is on the Aries point. There's Neptune, right on the Aries point. And if you look at the midpoints that Neptune and the Aries point are on, the North Node and Uranus are coming together. So the Aries point is on the North Node, sorry, is on the New Moon Uranus midpoint. And I think that is a big deal. And it does indicate to me that there is a Uranian feel to this new moon, which may not be immediately obvious because it links with Neptune and the Aries point. Something has to shift, something has to change. And so I don't think that I don't think that this new moon is trivial. I think that on the surface, I think this new moon looks fairly innocuous. It doesn't look like being a particularly important new moon. But when you drill down, when you look at the midpoints, and you see that the Aries point and Neptune are on the Sun Uranus midpoint and the Moon Uranus midpoint, then I think that we need to be thinking about what this new moon is about, what kind of influence it could have, and I think we shouldn't assume that things are going to be quiet. Some people are really pushing for change. Countries, governments, they want action now. And the question is, what are they going to do? Now, as far as, astrocartography is concerned, I didn't really spend too much time looking at the astrocartography. I didn't find anywhere in the world that looked absolutely desperate. But if it just, I'll just show you the astrocartography quickly. So there's it. Yeah, these are all the places. These are all the places where the sun and the moon are on the midheaven, and so it kind of goes through Western Ireland and Western Portugal. I don't know what's happening in Portugal. This new moon is on the midheaven in Lisbon. So that means that new moon on the Jupiter-Pluto on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint is on the midheaven in Lisbon. What's happening in Portugal? I believe there are political changes in Scorpio in Portugal. I believe Portugal's moving to the right. Is it? I really haven't been following Portuguese politics. That might say something about Portugal. You can take this line down. It goes through West Africa. It kind of goes through Morocco, but not through the power centres of Morocco. Casablanca is right up there, so I wouldn't have thought it necessarily is going to have much of an impact on on Morocco. Does it go through Ireland? Well, it goes through Western Ireland. Again, it misses the power centres. It doesn't go through Dublin. So if there was any country in Europe that I'd be really thinking about, I would be thinking about Portugal. As far as other places are concerned, the new moon is on the ascendant, going through eastern Texas. I don't know, but from an astrocartography perspective, I didn't find this particularly impressive. Okay, but there's one place that one might want to consider. This new moon is on the descendant, going through India, Pakistan, and so maybe that is a part of the world we should be looking at. So let me just reset this. Astro map for India. Sorry, I should have. So Jupiter is on the IC. It going so India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. So the new moon is on the descendant here, and so if it's on the descendant, you think of war, enemies, rivalry, and this new moon, it kind of goes up through eastern Pakistan. There's something going on between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which kind of India is sort of involved with, because India strangely has quite good relations with Afghanistan. I mean, it's kind of complicated part of the world, but maybe this new moon could stir things up politically in India and as well as Pakistan as well. So perhaps India, Pakistan is somewhere that we should be looking at. So I'm not saying overall that this new moon is looking particularly impressive in terms of the astrocartography, but the countries I would be focusing on would be Portugal, India, Pakistan, and maybe Sri Lanka. So finally, I just want to look at a few people who might be affected by this new moon. Well, there's Benjamin Netanyahu, and it is his birthday. So some of us might want to wish him happy birthday. Of course, I understand that Benjamin Netanyahu is a very controversial figure, but he is 76 today. And this is his approximate horoscope. He was born late morning on October the 21st, 1949. I think it's very likely that he has Sagittarius rising. I think that no one knows exactly when he was born, at least in terms of those who have talked about it from an astrological perspective. But looking at the times, it does seem he has Sagittarius rising. And Netanyahu was born on a new moon, just before a new moon. So he was born with Sun at 2737 Libra, approximately, the moon applying to that. So here is a man who is born on a new moon, who has got a new moon on his birthday. And if you look at Benjamin Netanyahu's lunar return, solar return. Okay, the new moon is not exact, but he's got a sun and moon in Libra at the time of his solar return. So I think it is very likely that it is going to be an important time for Benjamin Netanyahu, simply because of a repetition angle there, and the fact that this new moon is on his sun. So this new moon, remember this new moon, we've already talked about this new moon, and it's on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, it's on the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. So this new moon is going to put Netanyahu probably under a lot of pressure, but at the same time, does this mean that we should expect Netanyahu to collapse, to lose power? Not necessarily. I just think that this new moon creates continued focus for him, and I probably should have looked more closely at his chart. And so I'm not really making any predictions for Benjamin Netanyahu here. Although from a solar arc perspective, so if we look at Benjamin Netanyahu's solar arc direction, one thing I do notice is that his solar arc directed sun is at 1427 Capricorn. So his solar arc directed sun is starting to move towards a square of Neptune. Now that solar arc square Neptune it's not exact for another year, but it's starting to come in. And so Sun square Neptune, it's possible that Netanyahu may be on the verge of making a mistake. He has to be very careful about his judgment, because Netanyahu has Neptune on his south node, and Neptune on the south node, it's a generational thing. Anyone born around when he was born would have Neptune on the south node, but Neptune on the south node can be about tripping oneself up, having fantasies, thinking something is possible, pushing something too far, maybe. I mean, he's got Neptune on the north node in Libra, playing all sorts of very clever power games. But are they all going to blow up in his face? I mean, that is possible. And with solar arc directed Sun moving towards a square of Neptune, square of North Node, square of square of a nodal axis, I think that this is potentially quite a dangerous time for him. Dangerous in the sense that he could make mistakes, but the Sun isn't quite there yet. So it won't be for probably well into next year that he really is starting to feel that Sun square Neptune. And then a few other people who might be impacted by this new moon. There's the president of president of Argentina. Now his birthday is October the 22nd, and he has Sun Mercury conjunction in Libra, and so this new moon is going to be pretty close to his Mercury, pretty close to his Sun. So he's going to have to get himself together. It certainly puts a focus on Javier Milei. There's already a focus on Javier Milei because it does look as if his reforms are not working out. We already know that Trump has had to send tens of billions of dollars to support the Argentine economy. I don't quite know what he's doing with that money, but it all started off very well for Milei, but maybe the new moon is going to represent a sort of a new chapter in Milei's presidency, and it's not looking good. So the question is, how's it going to work out? I mean, maybe I should look at Milei again in more detail, maybe sooner rather than later. Maybe I'll try and do that tomorrow. And so someone else, okay, my apologies. Kim Kardashian. I just have to mention that simply because she's got a birthday. It's Kim Kardashian's birthday, so today. She's got the same birthday as Benjamin Netanyahu, and she's got her Sun at 28 degrees Libra, so she has got a new moon on her Sun, and so new moon on her Sun. She's got a new moon on her true black moon Lilith as well. I don't know. Obviously, I'm not particularly interested in Kim Kardashian, but I would have thought new moon on the Sun. You try and be positive about that. Maybe there's something new she can bring together. May say something about relationships. May say something about the men in her life. I'm not going to dwell on that subject. Peter Mandelson, former British ambassador to Washington, whose connections with Epstein got him into trouble, big trouble. And Mandelson does have a Sun-Saturn conjunction in his horoscope in Libra. So this new moon is on his Sun-Saturn conjunction. So given we know that Mandelson has already had this revelation between him and Epstein, maybe the new moon is going to say more about it. Maybe there'll be more revelations about Mandelson and Epstein, or more embarrassments, or something else like that. I don't know, but Mandelson, he's always thinking about something. He's always got plans. And so this new moon does hit Peter Mandelson. So perhaps he's someone we should be looking at, over the next couple of weeks. And a couple of other politicians. Alexander Vucic, who is president of Serbia. His Mars is at 2853. So this new moon is opposition his Mars. And he's under constant pressure. You have demonstrations in the street in Belgrade and other towns in Serbia. A lot of people want to get rid of him. One has to wonder, who is supporting them. Of course, Vucic likes to play it both ways. He likes to kind of be friendly with Russia. He likes to be friendly with the EU. He's playing this balancing act. He's a Pisces. I mean, he's playing this Pisces game, and it could easily go wrong. And he has got he's got this new moon opposition his Mars. So I think that this could represent some new problem for Vucic. Will he be able to deal with it? I don't know. but that's he's someone affected by it. Then there's Iran, and Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, he was born around the time of a new moon. I don't have his time of birth, but he's got Sun at 28 Aries, so he's got the new moon opposition his sun. Maybe that might represent a threat to his leadership. It's always a bit of a problem. I mean, with Iran, you've got pressures in many different directions. You've of course got this threat of war with Israel. You have got the desire for social change. There's this question about whether you're going to end the ban on head coverings. I think the president, who's quite liberal, was thinking about removing this ban. He talked about saying it doesn't matter anymore, that other people in Iran have a different view, but it may represent the pressures in Iranian society that he can't necessarily deal with. It may say something about himself and his health. I mean, that may be a way of looking at it. And finally, someone I haven't looked at for some time is Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris's birthday, well, I'm making this video on Monday. Is that right? Yeah, I'm making this video on Monday. So it is, from Monday's perspective, it is Kamala Harris's birthday. But from a perspective of Tuesday, yesterday would be her birthday. It depends when you're looking at this video. But Kamala Harris was born at the time of a full moon, and I think that full moon has completely messed her up, totally messed her up. I think you can really explain Kamala Harris's failure as a politician, ultimate failure as a politician. Obviously, she did quite well. She got to the Senate and Attorney General of California and so on. But her failure to win the White House, and as being a very ineffective vice president, her complete inability to communicate in an authentic way, I think has a lot to do with that sun moon opposition, her full moon. Just that the sun seemed to really damage her moon, and she's got a new moon. The new moon is right on her sun. She's got a new moon on the day after her birthday, and so she's already in the news, because I think she just had a book out, and maybe she'll be in the news even more. I know that she can't go do anything catastrophically bad because she's not in politics. She's got no political responsibility. But this new moon, I think, is going to be important for her. Maybe something to do with her personal life. Well, of course, it might have something to do with her ambitions. Maybe she'll decide she wants to give it another go. Give what another go? I don't know whether she's got any political ambitions, but this new moon certainly could have an impact on her. So that's all I'm going to say about the new moon. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.